The rain began just as my fuel gauge slipped below the empty line, the needle trembling as if it feared the inevitable. I hadn't seen another car for miles, and the forest lining the road loomed darker than the night sky. When the flickering sign for Ash Hollow Gas and Goods appeared through the mist, I didn't think twice. The gas station sat at the edge of a town that seemed more shadow than substance. Dim, uneven streetlights illuminated streets lined with boarded-up windows and sagging roofs. I rolled to a stop in front of the pump, but the station's windows were dark, and no one came out to greet me. I stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through my jacket instantly. A faint metallic tang hung in the air, sharp and wrong. "Closed up hours ago," a voice rasped behind me. I spun around. The man standing a few feet away seemed to materialize from the mist. He wore a tattered coat that hung loosely off his bony shoulders, his face shadowed by the brim of a soaked hat. His milky eyes didn't seem to focus on me directly, but somehow I felt his gaze like a weight. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, his voice trembling like the needle on my fuel gauge. "Not tonight." "What are you talking about?" I asked, shivering. Whether from the rain or his tone, I couldn't tell. "The whisper," he said, his lips barely moving. "It's coming. Always comes on a night like this. Don't listen to it, you hear me? No matter what it says. You hear it, you run. Don't even stop to think." Before I could ask him what he meant, the man turned and disappeared into the mist, his silhouette swallowed by the fog as though it had never been there. The gas station wasn't going to help me tonight, and neither was the empty town that stretched beyond it. My car sputtered when I tried to start it again, the engine coughing like a smoker too far gone. With no other choice, I scanned the streets until I spotted a sign in the distance. Ash Hollow Motel. The road to the motel was lined with trees that seemed to press closer as I walked, their branches stretching like claws in the wind. The rain had slowed, but the air felt heavier, as if the storm had settled into my chest instead of the sky. Somewhere deep in the forest, I thought I heard it, a faint whisper that made the hair on my neck rise. "Just the wind," I muttered, though the sound carried a rhythm, a cadence that felt almost human. By the time I reached the motel, I could barely keep my teeth from chattering. The sign buzzed with weak neon light. Vacancy. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up as I stepped into the dingy lobby. "One night," I said, handing over cash. She slid a key across the counter without a word. As I reached for it, her hand darted out to grip my wrist, her nails digging into my skin. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, locked onto mine. "Lock your door," she whispered, her voice trembling. "And whatever you do, don't listen. Not tonight." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just took the key, my heart hammering against my ribs, and headed for room 6. Room 6 was at the far end of the motel, its door painted a peeling shade of green. The key trembled in my hand as I slid it into the lock, the metallic click echoing louder than it should have in the silence of the night. I stepped inside, flicking the light switch. A single bulb overhead buzzed reluctantly to life, casting a sickly yellow glow over the sparse, damp room. The bed was covered in a faded floral quilt, its corners frayed. A lone chair sat in the corner by the window, the fabric mottled with stains that told stories I didn't want to know. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something sharper, like singed hair. I locked the door behind me, twisting the bolt until it couldn't turn any further. The receptionist's words rang in my ears. "Don't listen." I laughed bitterly to myself, though the sound didn't reach my chest. What was I afraid of? A whisper? A stranger's warning? The storm? I I tossed my damp jacket onto the chair and sat heavily on the bed, my hands rubbing at my temples. The room felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that amplifies every creak and groan of an old building. The heater clanged to life, and for a moment I thought the sound had come from inside the walls. I tried to sleep, but the mattress sagged beneath me, and the pillow smelled faintly of rot. My eyelids grew heavy, but just as I was about to drift off, a sound pulled me back. A voice. It was faint, barely more than a murmur, but it was there, threading through the silence like a needle through fabric. Come, closer. I sat up, my pulse quickening. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around me in a way that made the room feel smaller. I strained to hear it again, convincing myself I'd imagined it. And then it came again, clearer this time, like a breath against my ear. Listen. Find me. I bolted upright, my feet hitting the cold floor. The whisper wasn't inside my head. It was coming from outside the room. I crept to the window and peered through the dusty glass. The parking lot was empty, save for my car, now little more than a shadow in the dim light. Then I saw it. Movement near the edge of the forest. A figure stood at the tree line too far to make out details, but close enough for their presence to crawl under my skin. They didn't move, just stood there, watching. The whisper came again, curling like smoke through the air. Don't hide. Come. My breath hitched as the figure turned and melted into the trees, swallowed by the dark. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear, maybe something deeper, something I couldn't name. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and unlocked the door, stepping out into the cold night. The whisper grew louder as I approached the forest, beckoning me like a thread pulling at my mind. The trees loomed taller now, their branches tangling into a canopy that swallowed the moonlight. The ground was soft beneath my feet, the scent of damp earth filling my lungs. Closer. So close now. It wasn't the wind. I knew that now. It was a voice, a real voice, and it was waiting for me. The moment I stepped into the forest, the air changed. It was heavier here, thick and damp, with a chill that settled deep into my bones. My flashlight wavered in my trembling hand, its beam cutting through the mist in jagged strokes. The trees crowded closer, their gnarled branches twisting into shapes that resembled grasping hands. The whisper was louder now, threading through the stillness. This way. Don't stop. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the trunks and weaving through the underbrush. It wasn't a single voice anymore, but many, male, female, young, old, all overlapping, rising and falling like a dark symphony. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something stronger held me in place. It wasn't just curiosity. It was compulsion. The voice tugged at my mind, like it had latched onto some hidden corner of me I didn't know existed. The flashlight flickered, its beam stuttering as I pushed deeper into the woods. Shadows danced in the periphery of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. Only the trees, their trunks like silent sentinels. Then I saw it, a faint glow ahead, pulsating like a heartbeat. The whispers converged, guiding me toward it. My steps quickened, the damp leaves beneath my boots squelching with each movement. The glow led me to a clearing, its edges lined with towering oaks. In the center stood a mirror, its surface cracked and splintered, yet still reflecting the pale light of the clearing. The frame was ornate, carved with symbols that looked older than the trees around me. They glinted faintly, as though alive with their own energy. The whispers surged as I approached the mirror, rising to a crescendo. My flashlight flickered out entirely, but the mirror seemed to provide its own sickly illumination. As I stepped closer, my reflection came into view. But it wasn't right. The face staring back at me was mine, but twisted. Its grin stretched too wide, its eyes too bright, glinting with a malevolence I didn't recognize. My reflection moved when I did, but not quite in sync, as though there was a delay, or as if it had its own thoughts. Closer, the whispers urged, now emanating from the mirror itself. I leaned in despite myself, unable to resist. The reflection tilted its head, studying me as though I were the oddity, not it. Then it smiled, a smile so sharp it felt like a knife slicing through my thoughts. Before I could pull away, the whispers surged into a single word. Listen. The word struck me like a physical blow, sending me staggering backward. My head pounded, the air around me vibrating with a sound I couldn't escape. The whispers were inside me now, writhing in my mind, pulling at my memories, my fears, my very sense of self. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the reflection stepped closer. Closer than it should have been able to. Its hand pressed against the glass, and for a moment, I swore I felt the cold touch of fingers against my temple. "Find me," the voice whispered again, softer this time, almost tender. Through the pain, through the noise, I realized one thing. The mirror wasn't just a reflection. It was a door, and something on the other side wanted me to open it. I knelt before the mirror, trembling. The whispers had quieted, but their weight still pressed against my mind, a phantom ache that wouldn't subside. My reflection remained, though it didn't mimic me anymore. It stood tall and still, its eyes locked on mine, watching, waiting. The realization struck me like ice water. I wasn't looking at a reflection anymore. It was something else, something that had taken my shape. The carvings on the frame glimmered faintly, each symbol flickering as though alive. The glass rippled, the cracks deepening with a sound like grinding teeth. The whisper returned, low and insistent, threading its way through the stillness. "Open the way." My hand moved on its own, reaching toward the glass. I fought to stop it, my muscles straining, but it was as if invisible strings were pulling me forward. My fingertips brushed the surface, and the cold seeped into my skin, numbing me. The air shifted, heavy with static. The forest around the clearing seemed to fade, the trees receding into shadows. It was just me and the mirror now, its frame pulsing with an eerie light. So close. Free me. The voice wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was inside my head, threading through my thoughts like roots through soil. Images flashed behind my eyes. People I didn't know. Faces twisted in terror. A hand reaching toward me from the darkness. I pulled back with all my strength, ripping my hand away from the glass. The mirror groaned, the sound echoing like a scream. My reflection's grin faltered, its head tilting in what almost looked like disappointment. Then the whisper changed. It wasn't pleading anymore. It was angry. "You can't leave." The clearing grew darker, the glow of the mirror intensifying. Shadows poured from the cracks in the glass, writhing and twisting as they took shape. They weren't human, not entirely. Their forms flickered like smoke caught in a storm, limbs stretching unnaturally, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They surrounded me, circling like predators. The whispers became a cacophony, their voices overlapping in a chaotic, unbearable din. Stay. Listen. Become. I stumbled to my feet, my chest tight with panic. My eyes darted to the symbols etched into the mirror's frame. They seemed familiar now, though I didn't know why. My mind clawed at the fragments of knowledge the whispers had forced upon me. These weren't just designs. They were a barrier, a ward. The symbols were breaking. Desperation clawed at me as I searched for a way to stop it. My gaze landed on the ground, where faint traces of a circle had been etched into the dirt around the mirror. The lines were faded, incomplete. Finish it, my mind screamed, though I didn't know whose voice it was, mine or something else's. I dropped to my knees, my fingers scrabbling at the dirt. I found a jagged rock, its edge sharp enough to carve into the earth. The shadows hissed as I began to draw, their forms flickering in and out of view. No! The whisper roared, shaking the air around me. The shadows lunged, their hands stretching toward me, but the lines of the circle began to glow as I worked, brighter and brighter with each stroke. My hand moved faster, the rock tearing through the dirt, completing the pattern. The moment I finished, the mirror screamed. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, a mixture of rage and despair, piercing through the clearing. The shadows recoiled, their forms unraveling like smoke caught in a gale. The mirror cracked further, the fractures spreading like spider webs. The symbols on its frame blazed with light, forcing me to shield my eyes. And then, with a deafening shatter, the mirror exploded. The sound of the mirror shattering filled the clearing, a piercing crescendo that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. I dropped to the ground, covering my head as shards of glass rained around me. But they didn't hit. When I dared to look up, the fragments hung in the air, suspended like a frozen storm. They glimmered faintly, reflecting not just the light of the symbols, but something far darker. Shapes twisted within their surfaces, faces, hands, things I couldn't fully comprehend. And then the whispers returned, soft now, like a dying breath. You think it's over? The shards began to fall, embedding themselves into the dirt, forming a jagged circle around me. The glow from the symbols dimmed, their energy spent, and the oppressive silence that followed was worse than the noise. I stood, trembling, and turned to look at the remnants of the mirror. Where it once stood was now a gaping void, not a crack or a mark on the earth, an actual void, as though the fabric of the world had torn open. It was blacker than anything I'd ever seen, deeper than night, and it seemed to pulse, alive with a rhythm that matched my racing heart. Something moved within it. A hand, pale and impossibly long, reached out, gripping the edge of the void. Another followed, pulling something massive and otherworldly into the clearing. Its form was impossible to fully see, like looking through ripples in water. Eyes blinked open along its shifting surface, hundreds of them, staring straight at me. The whispers rose again, now coming from the creature itself, 1,000 voices speaking in unison. You opened the way. We are free. I stumbled back, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. The circle of shards flared faintly, and the creature recoiled, hissing like steam escaping a pipe. I couldn't step across. The circle held it, for now. But I knew it wouldn't last. My mind raced. I couldn't run. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't bound by the same rules I was. I had to finish what I'd started, to seal the void, to send it back. My eyes darted to the jagged rock I'd used to carve the circle. It lay just outside the line of shards, inches from the creature's grasp. The creature's many eyes followed my gaze. It reached out, a tendril of shadow slithering across the ground, aiming for the rock. No, I hissed through gritted teeth. I lunged, my hand closing around the rock just as the tendril brushed against my wrist. Pain flared, icy and sharp, and I screamed, pulling back as the skin beneath its touch turned black. The tendril withdrew, the creature hissing again. But I didn't stop. With my uninjured hand, I began carving into the earth again, drawing the final symbol I hadn't seen before. A closing loop, a seal. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, the creature thrashing within its confines. You cannot silence us. The earth trembled as I pressed the rock into the last line of the symbol, completing it. Light exploded from the circle, blinding and pure. The creature let out a guttural roar, its form dissolving into the void. The ground beneath it seemed to fold inward, swallowing the darkness, until nothing was left but scorched earth and silence. I knelt there for what felt like hours, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. The whispers were gone. The forest was still. But as I stood and turned back toward the motel, I knew this wasn't over. Something had been sealed, but not destroyed. And I could still feel it, deep in my mind, a faint echo, a fragment of the whisper. It hadn't left me, and it never would.